Next, I will open a hearing to consider a local law terminating the village's status as a tax assessing unit.
Just one comment on that last thing, Ryan, is that maybe in your mayor's letter or in something you could make a plea to
Slow down.
slow down, yeah.
Okay. I'd be happy to do that. In the meantime, I'll make a motion to open a public hearing to consider a local law terminating the village's status as an assessing unit.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're open. Larry, I don't know, did you want to bring us out and kind of give us a little history of what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it?
Sure. For those that are here, there's a page in the back. It's an information sheet that we put together just describing what the action is. Basically, the village right now acts as an independent assessing unit, which means that we have the right and the responsibility to prepare an assessment roll on an annual basis. We need to hire an assessor to prepare that roll, a qualified assessor. And after the roll is prepared, we need to defend the roll against grievances and, of course, handle any of the administrative functions that go along with that. And that's been the case here in Irvington for forever. I mean, I don't know how far back, but a long time. The other basic option, there's a few variations, but the other option that is available under the real property tax law in New York State is the village would terminate its assessing unit status, and in that case, the village would be required to rely on the assessments made by the town assessor of our village properties. And as you know, the town assessor has to assess these properties anyway because the town collects taxes for the town and for the school district, and for the county for that matter. So they would not be doing any extra work for this, and in fact they're required to provide us with a roll if we take this action without charge. Like I said, it's really an elimination of duplication. But those are the two basic options that are available. The information we've gotten from the New York State Office of Real Property Tax Services is that approximately 70%, and the number's probably gone up since, 70% of villages in New York State are not assessing units. They've terminated their status. Many of the ones that remain are actually down here in Westchester, Nassau, and Suffolk, from what we understand. So the issue here is that, and the board looked at this about a year plus ago, year and a half, and the issue at the time was that the difference between the village roll and the town roll, as it relates to village properties, was a significant difference, and it still is. There's a difference, as it stands right now, of $981,000 of assessed valuation between the two rolls. And that translates to 2.1% of our assessment roll. What that means is that essentially, with some minor variations, if the village terminates their status as an assessing unit, the assessment roll that they will use for next year's levy of taxes will be 2.1% lower, which translates to about $260,000 approximately of village taxes. So the options in front of the board again, the reason that it is in front of the board is that the village board, certain members of the village board have had discussions with members of a condominium complex here in Irvington, Downingwood. Downingwood made up nearly all of, 90% of that difference in the rolls. And the history, as best I can understand it, the history behind that is that the Downingwood condominium entered into an agreement with the village back in the mid-'80s to not challenge their assessment on the village level in exchange for the village picking up garbage for the complex. And that, after some discussions with the board at Downingwood, became very apparent, and also discussions with our village attorney, became apparent that such an agreement probably couldn't be made nowadays, and in that the garbage pickup wouldn't legitimately be able to be withheld from any particular organization, provided that it's collected as part of the village tax levy, which it is in this case. So the reality is that Downingwood is prepared, would be prepared, and in a position to challenge their assessment and essentially break the agreement with really no impact on them as an organization. So in effect, the agreement doesn't exist for all intents and purposes, because there's really no leverage on either side. So that being the picture, the board is considering it again. We've presented some information here to show that there are still differences beyond the properties that are located in Downingwood. There are some differences in role, but combined they're not significant, but of course individually they could be. And so again, going on to the information sheet, we've identified just statistically that, and looking at residential properties only, because we think that's the most pertinent part of the discussion here, that by adoption of the Greenberg rule or ceasing our assessing unit status, the 551 properties will see their assessments go down by about 1.8 million in taxable value, which is an average of 3,367 in value per resident. That will see their values go down. It will be an average of 3,367 in value, which translates to about $893 in village taxes. And just for breakout purposes, so people understand the magnitude of what we're dealing with here, is that of those 550 properties that will go down, 115 of them are specifically in Downingwood, and the total decrease of taxable value there is $921,000. Then there's 294 properties have been identified that will go up, and that would be for a total of $650,000 in taxable value, or an average of $2,200 roughly in taxable value, which translates into $587 in village taxes. Of those properties, 26 currently have challenges pending in the town, which would really indicate that there's just simply a timing difference, that the assessment was challenged successfully here in the village. They have a challenge pending in the town, and will likely get a very similar, if not the same, reduction anyway, so that they would not experience an increase. There's another 45, maybe a few more than that, but another 45 or so that have that will see that would originally see their taxes go up, but wouldn't in fact see that because the reason that they'd be going up is because of a difference in exemption levels between the village and the town. The town has indicated that although there may be currently differences between exemption levels between the village and the town, that if the board takes this action and goes forward, the exemption levels that are currently in the village would be brought over to the town roll as it relates to our property. So these 45 would not experience an increase. They're in the statistics, they're in the numbers, but they ultimately wouldn't see the increase because the exemption levels would stay the same. And on the cost side, I attached to the sheet, there's also an outline of what we see related to the assessment function and what it costs us currently and has costed us in the past. And so we see a typical year has been varying between 27, 28,000 and 37,000. There's reasons why some of the years are higher, but on average, that's been the cost that we've been experiencing in that 28 to 30 range. What we would see going forward by elimination of our tax status is really just 7,500 is I think a fairly conservative estimate of what we would see in terms of monitoring some of the larger cases that are running through Greenberg. What's typically done, and the school does this as well, the school is essentially beholden to the town's assessment as well. and the school, you know, may choose at times to get involved in a large case, to kind of throw their support behind it, to make sure that the town is settling the case and handling and defending the case in a proper manner. And we would see, you know, our counsel do the same when needed. So, but in terms of running the defense, in terms of, you know, responding in court to cases, we would not need to do that going forward. So, you know, roughly $20,000 of savings on an annual basis. We also pointed out, although not quantifying it monetarily, we've pointed out that the function results in about 300 man-hours of labor in the clerk treasurer's office, and it seems like more because it's at the worst possible time of the year, which is January, February, March, when the clerk treasurer is also trying to prepare a budget, and so it's a very time-sensitive, deadline-sensitive function, as you can imagine. And in addition, we also wanted to make sure to point out that the residents that currently come visit us in Village Hall for a variety of reasons related to their taxes, besides paying them, such as filing grievances and filing exemption applications, all of that would disappear. Currently, if someone wants to challenge their taxes, they would have to challenge both in the town and in the village, if they want the full benefit, of course. And the same thing with filing an exemption application. They would need to file it in both places. It's not an automatic thing. You know, we're essentially two separate entities with two separate roles. And that would all go away. The residents would no longer need to file in the village for anything. So, and that's,
Yeah, I had a couple things to add. I think one other thing that was interesting this year is we had lost our assessor for many, many years.
yeah,
And we were gonna be using Greenberg as our assessor anyway, so,
yeah.
you know, I think.
At a cost.
At a cost.
Yeah.
It would have actually cost us money to have Greenberg perform something they can actually do for us for free.
Right.
So, you know, I think, you know, and I look at the benefits are obviously the cost savings, in the long run. You know, again, the better service for residents since they don't have one-stop, shopping, so to speak, for, you know, challenging assessment. And I think that one thing we're probably underestimating is the amount of time that's gonna be freed up for, you know, for the clerk treasurer. You know, obviously that isn't it doesn't turn immediately into a cost savings, but down the road, I think it probably could. The negatives, I think the only things like really, well, other than the $260,000 in lost revenues, which of it, I think 250 we would have likely have lost anyway this year, plus additional court fees that we saved by not having to challenge that whole, you know, drawn-out fight that we would have lost anyway.
Right.
Since the person that's going to be doing our assessing says it's much lower. You know, I think that, you know, something that we've talked about as a board quite a bit is doing a town-wide or county-wide revaluation. We'll be losing the right to do a village-only revaluation, but we've said, you know, forever that this doesn't make, you know, to spend $250,000 to affect 20% of your tax bill when you still have to go and file with Greenberg doesn't really make sense anyway. So I see that as a very minor, downside. I think that, you know, the other thing you mentioned is that, you know, we almost become, you know, somewhat beholden to, say, Greenberg, in the fighting certiorari, we'll obviously have representation, but I think that the fact that Greenberg is going to be our assessor, you know, I can't imagine we're going to be having, you know, drastically different village and town assessments if it's going to be the same person doing it. So, you know, I can't imagine that, you know, we're going to be, you know, settling them for a different rate anyway. So I think that
That can't even happen.
Exactly. So
It's
to
the
me,
same
it's
assessment.
Right.
you know, the fact that was one of the things we always said was a negative. It's gone away, and the fact that they're going to be our assessing unit anyway. So
Yeah, no, I mean, look, there's a conspiracy theory approach to this that, you know, a proper, if I were looking at it from the town standpoint and using a conspiracy theory, the town doesn't collect a lot of taxes from village residents. They collect a fairly small amount from all of you that live here. And so that, you know, maybe the town, based on that, wouldn't put as much effort behind defending the properties in the village. That's completely, you know, I mean, that's way out there in terms of professional responsibility and all the other things that could happen, and I don't think that would be something that we would see here, but.
And speaking
But
to the
certainly-
school board, I don't think they've ever really felt that.
Yeah, and again, that's the reason why you have counsel, you know, in the meetings. They're very consistent with the other taxing jurisdictions about inviting them into the negotiation process so that everyone's interests are represented. And that's why we haven't put our expenses at zero. We put them at 7,500, which we think is it's our first year estimate, but we'll see how it plays out. But it keeps us at the table for the bigger cases that we should be looking at.
Has there historically also been a situation where, excuse me, where in a certiorari case that the town of Greenberg was successful and we were not, or vice versa? I mean, don't they usually hold pretty similar?
They're all very similar. Some of the differences that may have happened over the years are really because of differences in equalization rate between the two entities, so that maybe one has a little more leverage in the mathematics of it than the other. But for the most part, the values that are settled out by the town are values that we review, and you know, frankly, if it looks like the town is settling, I'm not saying this has happened, if it looks like the town is settling something out for something that looks absurd from our standpoint, we'll come to the table and offer up an appraisal or some other document to intervene. So, I don't see that as a big issue. And of course, this could be reversed, should it need to be. I don't suspect that would ever be. But the other thing to point out, just to clarify, this does not create extra paperwork for Greenberg. This is not shifting of, $20,000, $30,000 worth of costs over to Greenberg. Greenberg has to maintain the assessment roll because they have to do that as a town. They're required to. They're not. It'll be another column on their assessment roll. It'll say village tax, village assessment, which will be identical, of course, as the town assessment, and that's it. And then they'll be required to transmit a data file to us once a year, which, there's no cost there. So, I just wanted to clarify, so this isn't just a shifting around of cost. I know when we did the consolidation of the dog licenses, which is a far less intensive function than we're talking about tonight, but, you could make the argument that we didn't really save much here on the village, we just shifted the work over to the town. Maybe we made it more efficient, but not really any huge savings. That's not the case here. There's a function that's being done, it's not gonna change over there.
And I think too, one more piece of history is that the original genesis of this idea was when we were pushing, you and Brandon to find ways to, share services, and this was a, kind of an obvious one, a year and a half ago, that I think also I think New York State is pushing to have this, kind of happen as well. And, we had obviously our unique situation with Downingwood that prevented us from doing it a year and a half ago. But, I think, now there's almost no reason that I can think of not to do it.
What are the other villages doing within Greenberg?
The village of Ardsley just adopted this law as ceasing their assessing unit status. They did it about a month ago or less. They were a little bit easier because prior to that, they had already, maybe for a period of 10 years before that, had already adopted the numbers on Greenberg's roll, so a lot of the numbers were very close to begin with. It was much easier. And ours ultimately are very close, with the one exception we talked about. Dobbs Ferry is continuing to maintain their assessing status. They've entered into an agreement with the town assessor to do their assessments from start to finish, process all paperwork the same way that any village would need to, but they happen to be using the town assessor as part of an intermunicipal agreement. So that is extra work for the town offices, but they're being compensated for it. And the other villages, as far as I know, are similar to it. They have their own arrangements, but they're all assessing units.
Larry, are we sure about the immediacy with which the losses and gains effectively cancel out to zero? And the reason I ask is that if we had done this last year, we would have cost ourselves, we discovered, over $200,000 in revenue, like $234,000. So the net out to effectively zero is immediate.
I'm not sure what you mean by net out.
Well, we're saying,
in terms of the
if I
challenge.
read this document correctly, you're saying, well, we lose this, we gain that.
Mhm.
And effectively, it comes out to,
We immediately adopt the numbers that are on the town's roll,
yeah,
So
and that's
there's
it.
a loss in revenue of about $255,000.
Right. But again, that happens immediately. That is for the levy of next year's taxes.
but then there, according to this, here's what this document says, right? It says down here, eliminating any differences currently identified. At the very bottom,
I'm sorry,
page 1 of the document.
We'll be eliminating any differences between the two roles.
yes, well, this was
That relates
specifically,
to the exemptions.
that relates to the exemptions, right. That will be done in time for the assessment roll that will be used to levy this coming year's taxes, the 2012-13 taxes.
Right.
But that's only for the 45 properties that we identified that have differences in their exemptions between the two rolls.
And exemptions, you mean,
Veterans
Veterans
exemption,
exemption.
seniors exemption, right. So, for example, if a homeowner has an exemption that's for $2,000 here in the village, but it's only $1,000 in the town, because maybe their formula is slightly different than ours, the numbers that these statistics were used were based upon the fact that Greenberg only has 1,000. But when the taxes are levied next year and the roll is handed back over to us, the town assessor has assured me that the $2,000 in my example, the $2,000 will be carried into the town roll as an exemption that's allowed by the village. They can track the village value exemption and the town value exemption separately for individuals like this.
Which also doesn't preclude us from, setting up special exemptions in the future or anything either.
Yeah, exactly. I think
It'll be freed up.
I believe that's the case. We still have the ability to opt into certain exemptions at our choice, local option. But what made this easy is that most of the exemptions that we have are in sync with Greenberg. The levels, there's certain levels of senior exemptions and alternative veterans exemptions, and most of those are in sync, and so it'll make the transition easier. But there are 45 that were identified as being different, but by the time 2012-13 comes along, next year's taxes, they won't be different.
Well, okay, so that's what I'm trying to say is that because of the change at Downingwood and other changes, we don't ultimately have that kind of negative impact on the regular tax rolls.
In effect, we don't. I mean,
Well, that's what I'm concerned about.
let's follow,
Like, if we had done this last year, we discovered we would have cost ourselves $200,000 plus in revenue.
right.
And so what I don't wanna have happen is that.
Right.
So, that's why I'm saying that that's out
Right.
effectively, right?
Yes, effectively.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Okay,
And,
that's all.
that's right, and what I tried to outline before is to say that Downingwood has the ability to challenge, and they probably had the ability if they wanted to break the agreement, but they have the ability now to challenge, and it's obvious that the agreement to us there's no recourse in that agreement that can affect them. So with that, we expect them to challenge. If you didn't do this, for example, we would expect them to challenge, and then you as a board would decide what to do with that challenge. Would you grant it? Would you defend it? Would you fight it in court? There's a whole series of things.
I understand.
Now, I don't think, and I know that you wouldn't get any advice from our village attorney or others, or our village assessor if we had one, that would tell you to defend it, because the assessments are obviously haven't been challenged since 1987. So what we're saying in effect is that case, were it to be brought, would be granted or lost, however you want to look at it.
Right, so that was the genesis.
So this cuts all that off.
That was the genesis of my original question. If you consider all these factors, right, including the last paragraph there, and everything else, then effectively we're netting out, we're fairly confident we're netting out to no gain, no loss. It's not a sure bet, but we feel relatively confident that that's the case. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense to do this.
That's correct.
That was-
We're gonna end up where we would end up if we kept our own assessing status. We're gonna end up there anyway. We're gonna lose, $981,000, maybe not that exact number, but $250,000 of tax revenue attributed to Downingwood specifically, and that's a fact. from our standpoint.
And in terms of timing, that all, the hit is on the 2012, 2013 budget.
Yes. Mhm. Now, the one benefit too that we didn't really mention is from a timing standpoint, you probably recall during our budget process that the assessment roll and that assessment number is really an estimated number up and through the very beginning of the budget hearing process in April. Up to that point, you're dealing with nothing more than an estimated number coming out of the clerk treasurer's office. And that's because the assessment roll is prepared in the village on January 1st. As of January 1st, the preliminary roll appears February 1st. It gets challenged 3 weeks into February. The decisions are made on those challenges or not by the end of March, and then a final assessment roll doesn't get published until April 1st. So it's a moving target that entire time. With the town roll, it's finalized in September. And there can be some changes to it, but we would plan to cut off those changes as of March 1st every year with the town. And so we will have a fixed, a number that's gonna be 2.1% less. I mean, we know that number already.
Well, it'll help in budget projection earlier on.
Yeah, yeah. I just wanna be sure that we're not doing something that has a risk of our losing 261, 250, 234,000, whatever it is. You said it was 261 total, 90% of that was this, so I thought that was like 234 or something like that. But I wanna make sure that we're not gonna lose that money for even 1 year. There's no guarantee, but we're reasonably confident that that's not going to be the case if you do this. That's all I was trying to get at.
Yeah, we are, again, we had very productive discussions with the board at Downingwood, and we know exactly where they're going, and we know exactly what the outcome would be, so that's our recommendation.
Okay. Just fine.
And so there any, I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, so clearly 90% of this impact relates to Downingwood. And then others, where people's assessments are going down, we're not gonna hear any complaints. People's assessments going up, I understand that for most of them, the change is relatively modest, and that's probably true in both directions. Have we looked, and are there any property owners where the increase in assessment would be more than modest, and do we have any concerns about that?
I mean, the number I presented was an average, so there's no question there's some on the high side, some on the low side. The thing I would say is this, in discussions with the town assessor over this, the town assessor would welcome and invite people to contact her office, informally after the new year, for example, assuming this action's taken and it becomes law. They are open to discussing an easy transition from the currently elevated town assessment, and we're talking about the people who may be going up for the 1 year. They would be more than accommodating to look at each fact and circumstance, make sure that there's no obvious reason why the two are different, and adjust those assessments in the town without the need for hiring of a representative, without the need then to split the cost of that with your representative, which is often the case, that they would work very closely. As a matter of fact, there was even a suggestion that the assessor's office there, in recognition of some of the transitions here, would conduct a day here, a Saturday, where people can come in and sit down and go through it with some staff from the assessor's office. So they're very willing to accommodate the situation. They understand it. There's nothing legally that can be done for those people whose assessments are different in the town than they are in the village, and there's very different reasons for everyone. It's not just a specific reason. I mean, we can't, for example, we can't control the past history where an owner, for whatever reason, may have challenged their assessment in the village, but chosen not to challenge it in the town, ever, or even one time. So, but that will work itself out through 1 year, and then the town's willing to make it go smoothly for the years going forward. So I think that's it.
Larry and I talked about maybe even anyone over, say if the valuation changes by more than X amount, call it $1,000. Maybe actually send them a letter that says, you know, if you wanted to discuss your situation with the Greenberg assessor, you know, we'll have a Saturday and a Wednesday night, and, you know, at Village Hall or something, where you can come in and make it as easy as possible, as well as make sure that they're aware of it.
Sounds like a good idea.
And so, the reasons for this, I think you gave an example, I was really scratching my head trying to
Why would it be
understand
different,
why
yeah.
that would be the case, that there would be a difference. But if someone simply never challenged, the one, but did, you know, the
Right.
village tax, and
That's, in some of the larger ones, that's what the situation is. It also could be where someone filed an exemption application here but didn't in the town. That's another example of one that
they
could have
could have,
happened.
but they just didn't make it.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been very good about, our office here has been very good about directing people to make sure that they send their paperwork over to Greenberg. But, you know, when we're separate like this, the duplicate process is in place, and we can't force people to take the action. We can only advise them. So.
And I even remember some, you know, like, you know, where there's, I remember like, we saw like what we said before, was what Greenberg did, and it was just like $1,000 off or whatever, and it was just,
Yeah.
take it, you know, like it was.
Yeah,
and
there's some
they-
differences like that, sure.
Does anyone else on the board have anything to say? Let's open up public comment. Public comment? Please.
My name's Victor Shamus, and I live in Richmond Hill. I've been following the published final assessment valuations from Greenberg and Irvington since I've been here. And in the 38 units that we have, maybe 10 are green. Everybody has been off for as long as I can remember. The last I looked was some were up 10%, some were down 10%. A lot of them are the same. I'm just concerned about the people that are going up to 10%, as you know, as Ken said. Also, if you're going to tell people to come here to get the lower valuation, that means you're gonna get lower taxes, so your percentage that you just mentioned about losing might be bigger.
That's correct.
Tell people. The other thing is that the town of Greenberg has a 3.41% calculation for their total property value. Well, from what I gather, Irvington has 2.91. That means that the total valuation of the entire property in Irvington is gonna go down by a substantial amount.
That's actually a good thing, believe it or not.
It is?
From our standpoint, it is.
I mean, somebody looks, the value of your house, for argument's sake, is now 700,000, it might go down to 600,000.
Right,
If you have to get a mortgage, somebody may come and say, it's a problem. I'm just asking, I don't
Sure.
know.
No, I
You know,
understand.
I'm not an expert
No,
at this.
but remember, the value that the assessor thinks your house is worth isn't necessarily what it's worth in the marketplace.
I agree.
What it's worth in the marketplace is actually a fixed number. What isn't a fixed number is the equalization rate that you just mentioned, which can be different in the town and the village, which in and of itself is an inane concept. I mean,
Do you still
Right.
maintain the 2.1%?
it's
was-
actually higher than
it
this,
was actually
3.14 or something. It went up
Oh,
from
it
when
changed?
you
Went up,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
went
Yeah,
up.
All right.
Our number was issued a little late, but.
Okay. The other thing is, I just did a fast calculation on your two examples here, and it says that you're gonna lose $893 on the average for 551 properties. That comes to $844,000. And you're gonna make $587,587 on 294 properties. That's $172,000. If you subtract the two, I get a loss of $671,000 in taxes. So forget about the 200,000. I got $671,000 on those two numbers. And if you're saying that Downingwood is gonna go down,
I think
that makes it even more.
Well, no, that's in
Must be
that
some
number, yeah.
redundancy.
You're enough accountants.
No, first of all, the analysis down below is only looking at residential properties.
So I know, so I gather it's
Right.
we're gonna lose about $670,000 in taxes on those residential properties. I multiplied 893 by 551,
Right,
and the other one was 587 by 294. And I took the difference on the two.
maybe in residential, but.
I mean, maybe you're gonna make it up.
We're picking up in some of the commercials. Yeah,
Okay.
the total number, the 981,538 was the total number when we added them all up, including the commercial properties. If you see it in the
But
middle.
that's not
middle section.
taxes, that's the assessed
That's
value.
taxable
Right.
value, right?
But if you multiply that times, what is it, what was the number, Larry? For every, it's like
265 per thousand, yeah.
per thousand, for every $1,000, because we haven't had an
Okay.
assessment since 1955.
All right, so it's about $200,000.
Exactly right, it comes out to the $250,000.
For the total.
The total number, yeah.
All right, I guess my concern was that in
It was
our
actually much
development,
bigger.
some people went up, and what are you gonna do with those people?
Right.
If you're gonna tell them, then they're gonna go and get it down, so.
It might be slightly larger,
All right,
but,
no, I think it's great to have to go to one place,
right.
you know, and
Yeah,
everything else
ultimately.
is save Brenda a lot of hours.
Yeah, I mean,
One time I
ultimately,
can talk to you. Oh, that's it,
Thank you very much.
okay.
Anyone else?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Bryant. I'm a local attorney and a broker, a Coldwell banker, and I do a fair share of tax grievances. And I think this is really a good thing, ultimately. It's gonna be good for the village, it's gonna be good for the town. I work with Edie McCarthy closely on a lot of stuff, and she's all for it, and I think that's great. My concern is in this transitional period, where we're gonna have people that have legitimate grievances that they can't bring in February, therefore meaning they're gonna pay an inflated assessment rate, even though they can grieve in June when the new date comes along. Am I right that the grievance date for February is gone, therefore it's rolled into June?
Right.
But the tax payment dates for the village will remain the same, right?
correct.
So you're paying in April on a bill that you would have legitimately had a right to grieve and get reduced in February under the old system. So a simple example would be if a guy's got an assessment of 20 grand, and legitimately it should be 17, $3,000 difference. And within reason, a $3,000 assessment in the village is about $1,000 out of pocket, round numbers, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So one of those payments is $500, that's $500 the person's never gonna get back, gone. So I just wanted to get the position on that, if you guys had thought about some way to help folks who might fall into that gap while this thing is in transition. I had a suggestion, but I thought I'd see if you guys had thought
Right,
about
right.
it.
Yeah, no, I mean, we definitely considered it. We know that there's a, you know, there's a period, because the town roll is done and prepared earlier, and the grievance period was back in June. There really would have been only a small window back, 9 months ago to even be able to address that concern and still have people know that they can go to the town. Frankly, the majority, as you can see from the numbers, at least in the residential side anyway, the majority of people have typically gone to the town first. I mean, that's just
Sure, that's 2 out of your
normal.
$3 you might as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's an unusual situation where they've actually had a reduction here. The numbers are relatively small, which is what we tried to show in these statistics. But as far as a way around it, a different approach without putting things off for a year, unless you have a better suggestion.
Well, here's my suggestion, and I analyzed it like an appeal, right? Somebody loses at the village level in February, they then file their STAR, which quite often is not decided until after that first payment is made. And then what do? Then you crank out a refund. You could do the exact same thing here. For anybody who files in June as an Irvington resident and gets a legitimate reduction, there could easily be a prorated refund for the portion they would have paid at the reduced level in April had it been determined back then. I don't think it's gonna be a lot of bodies, but I think,
Right.
who cares? One person shouldn't pay more than they have a right to.
Right, and I had a similar, you put it actually more succinctly than my conversation, but I had a similar conversation with Edie McCarthy, and the net result of it was, if you can come up with a way of legally doing what you're saying, it might not be a bad option. So, I don't know the answer whether that's legal or not. We'd have to look into it.
Okay.
But it's certainly a possibility. We should explore it.
Okay. Like I said, I don't think it's gonna be a huge number of people, but
Right.
I know, I'm anticipating 2 questions I'm gonna get, from people who say, well, what if, I can't grieve in February, you're telling me I have a right to grieve, and, want to find something other than, that's too bad.
Right.
That doesn't really go very far. Okay, thank you.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Well, we can explore that further. It's a valid, but it doesn't hold anything up tonight necessarily, but it's a valid point. And one that, we were trying to work on in the short time we did, but you know, I think we still have a little more time after this to look into it.
Anyone else?
My name's Chris Parker. I'm a new resident of Irvington who moved into Downingwood and basically opened the board's eyes to the outrageous amount of overtax we were paying. So I'm sort of the one that was the genesis for the change that happened this year. I just want to assure the board there should be no doubt in anyone's mind that Downingwood most definitely will challenge the village assessment in February if the assessing unit is not terminated. And I'd speak only as a unit owner, of course, but I had notified all the 115 units in Downingwood of the situation, and the board really has no choice in the matter at this point.
Okay.
That's all.
Great. Anyone else? All right, anyone else up here? Rick?
No?
Notes? So I guess I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor? Okay, and I think I'm ready to move forward with the resolution, so if anyone else has any questions or concerns. Okay, so I'll go ahead and, it's a pretty short resolution actually. Resolve to adopt a local law terminating the village status as a tax assessing unit. I guess that's all I have to read, right? The actual law is, perfect. So I'll look for a motion.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is an approval and ratification of the continuation of membership, nope,